The night a mob hitman crashed the Oscars. It was Hollywood's most glittering event. The evening stars spent their entire careers dreaming about. The Academy Awards. Imagine red carpets illuminated by flashbulbs, elegant gowns sweeping across marble floors, and iconic stars posing for photographs that would define an era. But on one unforgettable night, glamour wasn't the only thing hiding behind velvet curtains. Deep within the crowd, camouflaged by tuxedos and smiles, lurked a man whose presence sent shivers through the underworld, a notorious mob hitman. While millions watched at home, completely unaware, Hollywood's brightest stars unknowingly brushed shoulders with a cold-blooded killer. Who was he? Why was he there? And most chilling of all, who was he there to eliminate? This wasn't an isolated incident, though the public rarely saw it. Hollywood has always had its shadows, hidden deals struck in smoky backrooms between studio heads and mob bosses, secrets whispered on sound stages, favors exchanged under dim lights, and reputations silently destroyed overnight. But the audacity of a known mob hitman infiltrating the industry's most sacred event was unprecedented, even by Hollywood's scandalous standards. Yet this story remained buried, expertly concealed by powerful hands determined to maintain Hollywood's sparkling facade, until now. Decades later, the truth finally emerges, unraveling a web of intrigue, betrayal, and violence woven into the very fabric of America's movie industry. So how did this ruthless killer manage to slip past security and gain entry to the most exclusive event in entertainment history? Was he there to deliver a lethal message? Or did Hollywood's underbelly hold darker secrets even the mob couldn't keep quiet? Brace yourself, because tonight, we're diving deep into the shocking story of the night a mob hitman crashed the Oscars. From the outside, Hollywood has always been synonymous with glamour, dreams, and success. Moviegoers admired the glitzy premieres, the flashing lights, and larger-than-life celebrities gracing the silver screen. Yet beneath this polished exterior lay a hidden network of secret deals, shady handshakes, and dangerous friendships. From the 1930s through the golden age of cinema, the entertainment industry was deeply intertwined with organized crime, more connected than most fans ever imagined. Hollywood's hidden relationship with the mob began early, as ambitious filmmakers struggled to secure funding for their projects. Major banks and legitimate financial institutions saw film ventures as risky, leaving studio executives desperate for alternative sources of cash. This desperation was the perfect opportunity for mobsters looking to invest money earned from gambling, bootlegging, and racketeering. Money they needed to legitimize and conceal. Men like Mickey Cohen, Johnny Roselli, and Bugsy Siegel soon became frequent fixtures around Hollywood parties, lavish studios, and exclusive clubs. These infamous gangsters didn't just provide financing, they wanted influence, control, and a piece of the Hollywood dream. In return, studio heads willingly overlooked the dark origins of their investors' wealth, turning a blind eye as gangsters mingled openly with screen legends. There were even high-profile cases where famous actors and actresses rubbed elbows publicly with known mob figures. Stars like Frank Sinatra openly associated with mobsters, his ties so infamous they became a permanent part of his legend. Marilyn Monroe's connections to organized crime figures, especially through her alleged relationships with powerful men, added fuel to decades of Hollywood gossip. These weren't isolated incidents. They were symptoms of a larger, darker reality. Mob-controlled unions like the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, IATSE, wielded enormous influence, dictating terms, wages, and conditions within Hollywood studios. If studio heads resisted, productions were sabotaged, careers destroyed, and reputations ruined overnight. Fear became a silent partner in Hollywood deals, and intimidation often spoke louder than negotiation. Despite this chilling reality, Most fans never noticed the shadows lurking behind their favorite films. The mobsters themselves enjoyed the reflected glory of celebrity, attending high-profile events, dining at renowned Hollywood restaurants, and shaking hands with America's beloved stars. The boundaries between the criminal world and entertainment blurred dangerously, paving the way for incidents so brazen they shocked even seasoned insiders. And yet, as startling as these connections were, nothing prepared Hollywood for the audacity of a notorious mob hitman boldly walking into the Academy Awards. How exactly did such a dangerous figure infiltrate the Oscars? Whose invitation gave him access, and what, or who, was he there for? Hollywood was about to discover just how vulnerable it really was, and the revelations would shake the industry to its core. To understand the gravity of what happened that night, we need to look into the man at the center of it all, a mob enforcer whose name sent chills through the criminal world. He wasn't some low-level thug. He was a polished, well-dressed, high-ranking figure who had carried out hits for some of the most dangerous crime families in America. While official records remain hazy, likely by design, many insiders believe the man who infiltrated the Oscars was none other than Johnny Roselli, a smooth-talking fixer and mobster with deep roots in both the Chicago outfit and Hollywood itself. Born Filippo Sacco, Roselli was more than just a gun for hire. He was the mob's bridge to Tinseltown, a man who could attend elite parties one night and order a hit the next. Roselli had been involved in almost every kind of racket imaginable: extortion, union corruption, bribery, and, most notably, murder. He made his bones running scams in Los Angeles before rising through the ranks to become one of the most trusted operatives for the outfit. What set him apart wasn't just his ruthlessness, it was his charm. Roselli looked the part of a movie executive: tailored suits, sharp smile, perfectly combed hair. He could blend in with the Hollywood elite without raising a single eyebrow. But beneath the facade was a man capable of unspeakable violence. FBI records later confirmed his involvement in multiple contract killings and deeply rooted connections to the CIA's off-the-books assassination plots during the Cold War. He was even allegedly involved in a plan to eliminate Fidel Castro, proof of how far his influence reached. In Hollywood, Roselli's presence was both tolerated and feared. He had his hand in everything from talent negotiations to labor disputes. Some say he even advised major studios on how to handle uncooperative stars or directors. To those who knew him, Roselli wasn't just a mobster, he was an insider, an untouchable. So when whispers began that a man like Johnny Roselli had been spotted inside the Academy Awards, mingling among celebrities and moguls, the fear was instant. It wasn't just that a criminal had crashed the event, it was that someone had let him in. Was he attending as a guest, or had he come with an agenda only the mob could understand? One thing was clear: Roselli wasn't there for the spotlight. He was there for business, and as the night unfolded, it would become terrifyingly clear that his presence wasn't a coincidence. Someone inside the building was being watched, or worse, marked. The question that still haunts Hollywood insiders decades later is simple. How did a known mob hitman get into the Oscars? It wasn't a street parade or nightclub lounge. It was the most high-profile, star-studded night in America, broadcast live to millions. Security may not have been what it is today, but even in the 1960s and 70s, it wasn't exactly easy to walk into the Academy Awards without credentials. So how did Johnny Roselli, one of the most feared men in organized crime, end up sitting among the glitterati? The answer lies in the power of connections. Roselli was no stranger to Hollywood circles. He had spent years cultivating relationships with actors, producers, talent agents, and even union bosses. Some were drawn to his charm, others to the protection he offered, and a few had no choice but to play nice. Mob influence was an unavoidable part of the industry back then. There are persistent rumors that Roselli gained entry to the Oscars through a well-known studio executive who owed the mob favors. While the identity of this executive has never been publicly confirmed, Reports suggest he had previously used mob muscle to settle a labor dispute that threatened to derail a major production. In return, the outfit expected loyalty and occasionally favors. Letting Roselli attend Hollywood's biggest night may have been one of them. Other theories suggest Roselli didn't need an invitation at all. His name was enough. He allegedly walked past security, flanked by two sharply dressed men, flashed a smile, and dropped the name of a major actor who vouched for him. In a town where image was everything, no one dared challenge someone who looked like he belonged, especially when that someone had a reputation for making people disappear. Adding to the mystique, some claim Roselli was accompanied by a high-profile actress whose name has been carefully scrubbed from all official records. She may have been dating Roselli, or more likely, pressured into appearing beside him to create a cover. Their presence together was just believable enough to prevent questions, but suspicious enough to raise eyebrows in the days that followed. There's even speculation that the Academy itself may have known, or at least suspected, his attendance. But what could they do? Publicly ejecting a mobster from the Oscars would have been a PR disaster. Quietly ignoring it seemed safer. Whatever the truth, one thing is certain. Roselli's appearance wasn't random. It was a power move, silent, calculated, and impossible to ignore. And while some guests dismissed him as just another connected guy enjoying the night, others felt the unease creeping in. Because when a man like Johnny Roselli shows up unannounced, it usually means someone is about to pay a debt, and not with money. On the surface, the ceremony unfolded like any other year. Flashbulbs popped, orchestras swelled, and silver statues were handed to teary-eyed stars. But behind the curtains, something was off. Stagehands whispered in hushed tones. Security guards radioed one another more frequently than usual. And a few well-known producers were seen looking over their shoulders, their smiles a little too forced. Johnny Roselli didn't crash the Oscars to be seen. He came to send a message. Eyewitnesses who later came forward under condition of anonymity described him moving through the Dolby Theater like he owned it. He didn't just sit quietly in the crowd. He mingled. He walked backstage. He stepped into VIP rooms reserved for executives and nominees. Wherever he went, conversations fell silent. One assistant director remembered spotting him near a private bar set up backstage for presenters. He wasn't drinking, the AD recalled. He was watching, just standing there like he was waiting for someone. And someone else, an unnamed producer, was reportedly so rattled by his presence that he left the venue mid-show. Others whispered about a brief confrontation near a side hallway where Roselli was allegedly seen cornering a studio lawyer. No voices were raised, no hands thrown, but the lawyer was visibly shaken afterward. When approached for comment years later, the man refused to speak, only stating, "That night changed everything." The energy backstage became tense. Even the event staff sensed it. One wardrobe assistant claimed she saw security follow Roselli at a distance, but never intervene. "They didn't stop him," she said. "They wouldn't dare." There were rumors of a threat made earlier that week, a veiled warning that if Roselli was touched, something would happen at a rival studio's premiere. The Oscars weren't just a stage that night, they were a chessboard. And then came the moment that sent everyone reeling. During a commercial break, a presenter scheduled to go on stage vanished from their dressing room. They reappeared 20 minutes later, visibly distressed. The official story was a wardrobe malfunction, but insiders knew better. That presenter had once publicly denounced mob involvement in Hollywood. Was it just a coincidence, or had Roselli paid a visit? Despite the growing whispers, the ceremony rolled on. Hosts told jokes, trophies were awarded, and at-home audiences remained blissfully unaware. But for those behind the scenes, the message was clear. The mob could go anywhere, even the Oscars. By the time Roselli left, before the ceremony ended, he'd made his presence known without saying a single word to the public. He didn't need to. The fear he planted in that room would linger far longer than any acceptance speech. And in the days that followed, Hollywood insiders asked themselves the question no one dared voice aloud. Who exactly was he there for? And why were they still breathing? Speculation spread like wildfire in the days and weeks following the Oscars. Who was the real reason Johnny Roselli made his silent, chilling appearance? Theories ranged from plausible to downright paranoid, but one fact remained. He wasn't there for a photo op. He had come with intent, and that meant someone in the building had reason to be very, very afraid. One of the most persistent theories involves a silver screen heartthrob whose meteoric rise had drawn not only fanfare, but enemies. According to multiple behind-the-scenes accounts, this actor had unknowingly crossed paths with the mob after refusing to participate in a backroom film financing deal. He had reportedly been approached by a shady investor with promises of creative freedom and distribution, but turned it down flat. That investor, sources claim, had ties to Roselli. Turning him down wasn't just a business decision, it was an insult. Others pointed to a high-powered producer who was facing multiple lawsuits from crew members and screenwriters. There were whispers that this man had skimmed profits from a film partially bankrolled by mob money, underestimating how closely the books were being watched. An anonymous source from the production claimed the mob had only discovered the missing funds weeks before the Oscars, and Roselli's appearance was their answer. Then there was the leading lady theory. One actress, still beloved today, was rumored to have had an affair with a notorious mob figure. When she tried to end the relationship, insiders say threats followed. Publicly, her career soared. Privately, she hired full-time security. Her appearance at the Oscars that night was seen by some as a challenge. Was Roselli there to frighten her back into silence? But perhaps the most chilling theory was that Roselli didn't have a specific target. He was there to remind everyone that the mob still had reach. In a year where the Justice Department had begun making noise about cracking down on organized crime's influence in entertainment, this public stunt may have been more than a message to one person. It was a message to all of Hollywood. Years later, a confidential informant told federal investigators that Roselli was instructed to be seen at the Oscars, not to cause a scene, not to pull the trigger, just to show up. The informant said it was psychological warfare. The outfit didn't need to kill anyone that night. They just needed to remind everyone who really ran things behind the scenes. Still, even now, names get tossed around in hushed tones at old industry dinners. Some believe the target dodged a bullet, literally. Others think the job was never meant to go that far. But ask anyone who was there, and they'll tell you, something happened that night, and someone in that audience felt the crosshairs land squarely on them. For an event as prestigious as the Oscars, security is supposed to be airtight, especially in an industry known for its scandals, stalkers, and obsessive fans. But the year Johnny Roselli infiltrated the Academy Awards, security was more formality than fortress. No metal detectors, no digital scans, no facial recognition tech. Just uniformed guards in tuxedos and a clipboard with a guest list, one that was shockingly easy to manipulate. At the time, much of the security detail was outsourced to private firms, many of which had ties to unions that, ironically, were rumored to be under mob influence themselves. In fact, several members of the security team that night were later investigated for corruption, though no formal charges were ever filed. According to one former guard who spoke off the record years later, if Roselli wanted in, we were told to let him in. Simple as that. Another key vulnerability? The use of paper credentials and handwritten invites. Unlike today's encrypted QR code systems, Oscar invites in those days were shockingly easy to forge or to obtain through back channels. All it took was the right name and the right connection. And Roselli had both. One of the more disturbing revelations came from a now-retired Academy staffer who remembered seeing Roselli bypass 2 separate security checkpoints with nothing more than a nod from an event coordinator. That coordinator, as it turns out, had previously worked on a film tied to a shell company later exposed as a mob money laundering front. Whether that was coincidence or complicity remains unclear, but it certainly raised eyebrows. Security cameras weren't common then, especially in private areas like VIP lounges or dressing rooms. This gave Roselli the freedom to roam, to observe, and to have conversations that would never be recorded. It's believed he spent nearly 40 minutes backstage without being stopped, a staggering breach considering the number of A-listers and studio heads present. The official line from the Academy at the time? No unusual activity was reported. But that didn't match the private chaos. Multiple staff members resigned in the months after the event. 2 security contractors were quietly let go, and one internal memo, later leaked to a journalist, read simply, "If the Roselli incident leaks, damage control will be impossible." The truth is, no one wanted to admit that a mob assassin had walked into the heart of Hollywood without resistance. It wasn't just embarrassing, it was terrifying. And if Roselli could stroll past security without so much as a pat down, what else could the mob do? That question would haunt the Academy for years, especially after what came next. Ask ChatGPT. When the final award was handed out and the curtain fell, most of Hollywood exhaled in relief. The show had gone off without a public hitch. But backstage, the atmosphere was anything but celebratory. Whispers flew faster than champagne corks. Johnny Roselli had been there, the hitman, the enforcer, the man whose reputation preceded him in every room he entered. The moment word started to spread, the industry's top brass sprang into silent action. Phone calls were made before sunrise. Executives contacted PR teams. Studio heads convened in private meetings. Their top priority? Contain the damage. No one could afford to let this story reach the press. At the time, only a handful of journalists caught wind of the whispers. Most dismissed it as another Hollywood rumor. But one reporter, a Hollywood beat writer known for digging into industry gossip, filed an inquiry with the Academy asking whether unauthorized guests had attended the ceremony. He never got a response. His editor later told him to drop it. Pressure, he believed, had come from above. Meanwhile, those who were there that night began distancing themselves from the incident. Presenters, producers, even nominees who may have seen Roselli refused to comment publicly. A-list celebrities who had exchanged pleasantries with him were instructed by their teams to remain silent. Behind the scenes, publicists were rewriting timelines, fabricating who was in what room at what time, and crafting airtight alibis for anyone even remotely connected to the mob. The Academy itself initiated what was then called a discreet internal review, though no official statement was ever released. The results of that investigation? Sealed and buried. One former Academy board member later claimed, "We didn't want scandal." The Oscars represent everything Hollywood aspires to be. A mob hitman in the wings? That's the kind of thing that unravels legacies. Even the government was quiet. The FBI had been monitoring Roselli for years, but for reasons that remain murky, no formal investigation was opened into his Oscar appearance. Some speculate that the Bureau didn't want to admit how deep organized crime had infiltrated the entertainment world. Or worse, that they already knew and had been using Roselli for their own purposes, as later documents suggested regarding CIA assassination plots. The entire incident faded into legend. It became one of those whispered Hollywood stories shared at private parties and old money galas, where the elite talked freely once the cameras stopped rolling. But unlike other gossip, this tale came with an unspoken rule: never speak of it on the record. Still, the effects were lasting. Security at future ceremonies became tighter. Studio executives became more cautious about the company they kept. And a quiet fear took root, a fear that no matter how powerful Hollywood had become, there were still darker forces who could walk right in, uninvited. And just like that, the glitz of Oscar night was forever tainted by the ghost of a man who never belonged. but who made sure everyone knew he was there. In the weeks that followed the Oscars incident, the industry did its best to act like nothing had happened. The headlines focused on who won Best Picture, what dresses graced the red carpet, and which actor gave the most tearful speech. But behind closed doors, a different story was unfolding, one that threatened to unravel the long-standing, carefully concealed relationship between organized crime and the Hollywood machine. Johnny Roselli's brazen presence at the Academy Awards wasn't just a shock, it was a wake-up call. For decades, the mob had lurked in the shadows of the entertainment business, pulling strings quietly. But now, they had stepped into the spotlight, literally, and the illusion of control that Hollywood's elite thought they held began to crack. Whispers turned into questions. How deep did the influence go? Which films had been financed with mob money? Which studio heads had looked the other way, or worse, cooperated? In the months that followed, independent journalists, federal agents, and even a few brave industry insiders began digging. What they found wasn't just troubling, it was systemic. Leaked FBI memos confirmed that multiple crime families had laundered money through film productions, using shell companies to fund B-movies and vanity projects that quietly funneled millions in illegal profits back into syndicate hands. Labor unions, especially those tied to set construction and projectionists, were found to be under mob control, allowing gangsters to manipulate film schedules, stage walkouts, or shake down studios for labor peace payments. One of the most damning discoveries was a 1950s-era deal between a major studio and a Chicago-based mob front to produce a series of crime dramas. On paper, the arrangement seemed legitimate. But behind the scenes, the agreement guaranteed the mob a cut of the profits, editorial control over certain scripts, and the ability to plant actors with mob connections in minor roles, effectively laundering their criminal identities into legitimate careers. And it wasn't just men in suits. Several high-profile actresses were rumored to have been sponsored by mob figures, their careers fast-tracked through coercion, favors, or worse. In exchange, these women became leverage, used to influence producers, sway casting decisions, or simply spy on Hollywood's inner circle. Despite mounting evidence, very few people were ever held accountable. The power of the studios, combined with the mob's reach and the public's reluctance to confront the truth, ensured that the full story never came to light. Investigations were stalled, testimonies were recanted, and documents quietly disappeared. But the damage was done. For those in the know, Hollywood would never be seen the same way again. The image of a clean, glamorous industry had been permanently stained by the revelation that for years it had danced on strings pulled by men like Roselli. And while the world continued to tune in each year to see who would take home the golden statue, the industry's insiders knew. The real power wasn't always sitting in the front row. Sometimes it was watching silently from the shadows. No camera flashes, no applause. Just a cold stare, and the knowledge that it could all come crumbling down in a single night. The Academy never issued a statement. No arrests were made. The newspapers moved on. But for those who were there, the actors, producers, assistants, and stagehands who caught even a fleeting glimpse of Johnny Roselli moving like a phantom through the corridors of the Oscars, the memory never faded. Because the truth is, something did happen that night. Maybe it wasn't a murder or a dramatic scene fit for the tabloids. Maybe no one screamed or ran. Maybe no cameras caught the moment when a hitman made eye contact with his intended target. But something real and chilling took place, a reminder that Hollywood was never just about movies. For decades, the entertainment industry sold the world a dream. But like all dreams, there was always the risk of waking up. That night, the dream cracked just a little. The cameras showed the glitz, but behind the curtains was fear. Behind the gold statues and designer gowns stood a man who had taken lives in silence, now walking calmly past movie stars and moguls, completely untouchable. So, what really happened that night? We may never know every detail. We may never confirm who invited him, who he came to intimidate, or whether his presence was a warning or a judgment. What we do know is this: his appearance worked. It left a mark on the most powerful people in show business. A silent, cold reminder that the mob could still write the script, even in the heart of Hollywood. And maybe that's the scariest part. Not that a killer got into the Oscars, but that nobody tried to stop him. In the end, Hollywood moved on. The next year brought new winners, new red carpets, new scandals. But somewhere, deep in the industry's collective memory, that night remains. The night a man with blood on his hands walked freely through a palace of stars, and no one said a word. Because in Tinseltown, silence isn't just golden, it's survival.